Hello, Southern California, and welcome to this week's edition of Right on the Money. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley, and joining me in the studio is Tom Mosley. He is the founder and president of Mosley Wealth Management. Tom, my friend, it's always a joy to see you.
Fantastic to be back.
Well, I know we've put together another amazing show for our viewers at home today. It's jam-packed, so we're just going to get right to it.
Let's go.
But to kick off today's discussion, I want to share a brief story that recently happened. I was in a conversation with a dear friend of mine who is 65 years old. She's been working for the same company for over 40 years. She's been an amazing saver. Her husband is 70 years old, and of course I was talking about being on the show with you, and that always, leads people to ask me questions about their own financial life, right? So they were asking me some questions, and they shared that they have been working with one of the big corporate firms for several years, but we got into the conversation about taxes, and I happened to mention how important it was for them to start thinking about their RMDs. And they both looked at me and said, "What is that? We've never heard this term. We've never had a conversation with our advisor about these RMDs." So we are going to discuss today the importance of RMDs, what they are, what you need to know about them, and why it matters so critically for the success of your retirement. So let's just start with what are RMDs, Tom?
RMDs. A lot of people come in and they say, I want to talk about those RDMs or RM, and
RPMs.
One guy called it RPMs. He absolutely did. RMDs. Now, I want to tell you, it stands for Required Minimum Distribution. I'm going to tell you what it means. Required, you understand what that means? Minimum, there's a minimum you have to take out, and it has to distribute. It has to come out of your IRA and your 401k. Required minimum distribution. There's a certain point where you reach. Right now, it's at 73 years of age. Once you reach 73 years of age, if you've got what we call a qualified plan. Say, what's a qualified plan? It's a plan that has not been taxed as of yet. You say, what are those? My 401ks, my 403bs, my 457s, all of that money that you've been putting away for years. They've been taking it out of your check pre-tax, pre-writing the check to you. They've been putting it into the 401k.
These tax-deferred accounts,
tax-deferred, qualified. Now, the tax man cometh, okay, at 73 years of age. And I don't even, Kristen, I don't tell the other ages anymore, but within the past 5 years, if you're saying, I didn't know it was 73, okay, you're fine. Because within the past, actually 4 years, they've changed the age twice already. But right now, if you were born in 1950 or earlier, you have to take a required minimum out of, that's the distribution, out of all of those qualified plans every single year. And I didn't just say at 73, every single year going forward.
Right, starting at age 73.
Right.
And the issue is that the calculation is so complex. The rules are incredibly complex. They're always changing. To your point, there's been so many changes in just the last 4 years alone. And if you do it incorrectly, not only are you going to have to take the RMD out and pay taxes on it, but you're also going to be hit with massive IRS penalties, and we don't want anyone to have to pay that penalty. So that's why this discussion is critically important.
Well, and let's talk about the penalties. At 73 years of age, there are some people who are supremely sharp mentally and cognitively at 73 years of age. And I've done this for 28 plus years working with people who are in or near retirement. There's some people who are 73 years of age who are not as sharp mentally or cognitively and just understanding things. My own mother-in-law, when she passed away at 75, there were 5 years at that time of RMD letters that were stacked up on her kitchen table in the big piles. And she never wanted anybody to help her with anything. And all of those RMDs still had to be paid that she had forgotten to pay.
Plus
at
the
that
penalty,
time,
right?
no. When she passed away, even though she passed away, we still had to make sure that those were paid before the IRAs could be tapped into and we could distribute them among the children. So it's an unrelenting tax that comes. And to your point, Kristen, the penalty for not doing it correctly, if you don't take the right amount, it is down to 25%.
I know, how nice of them. It used
Yeah.
to be 50%. Now it's only 25%.
Right.
It's still a crazy amount that we don't want anyone to have to be
Yeah, if you were
paying.
supposed to take out $20,000 and you did it incorrectly, you still had to pay the tax. You got penalized for not paying it on time, their little late fees, and then you had a 50% excise tax on top of that. Thank you, Uncle Sam and Aunt Iris. They've dropped that to 25%. So it's still a huge penalty. Now, how do they determine it?
Yep.
That's also, it's not easy.
No, the calculation's really confusing.
And to your point, you know, we subtitle this show, "Don't do this on your own."
Don't try this at home, right?
Yeah, don't try this
do
on
this
your,
on
at
your own.
home.
Yeah.
There was a gentleman, I trained with a national trainer on IRAs and 401ks, Ed Slott. He's very famous. I'm a master elite advisor with him, and that means I've got a lot of tax training and IRA training behind me. And he was telling us in August back in Boston. He was telling us about a guy who had contacted him, and he said, the guy came to him and he said, "Ed, I'm a do-it-yourself person. I've tried to do my own required minimum distributions, RMDs, and I'm working with a big box firm. It's one of those big box firms that has no managers, and you like it because you don't pay very many fees, but you also don't get much help on things like this." And he had pushed the wrong button in calculating a $2.1 million IRA, and he had pushed the wrong button, and they had taken tax out on all 2.1 million rather than just the portion that was required for that year. And he was pleading, writing private letters at about the cost of $15,000 a letter to the IRS, pleading with them to reconsider and to undo what he had accidentally done. So it's a tough calculation. It's based on your age. I hear a lot of people say, well, the guy I'm working with just says do 4%. It is never ever a percentage. It's always a calculation based on your expected lifespan, which is determined by your age and how long they plan on you living. Because think about it from the government's perspective, you've not been taxed on this. They want to tax you on this before you're gone. And so it actually increases every year. Studies show that in retirement, you reach a point after the go-go years where you're moving into the slow-go and the no-go years where you don't spend as much money as you did in the go-go years when you're traveling and doing things.
Right.
But the required minimum distributions keep continuing to grow. And by the time you reach 85, 86, 87 years of age, you're having to take out 1/10 of what's left in your IRA because they need the tax dollars and they need to tax you on that. And so it's a big gotcha down at the end.
It is. And to your point, I mean, that's just a horrific story, but I know so many folks can inadvertently do it incorrectly because you don't know what you don't know and the rules are always changing. So even though the calculation can be so complex, the good news about all of this, we don't ever want to be Debbie Downers here on the show, right? The good news is this is what you do for folks day in, day out. You help them navigate, calculate the RMDs, and make sure that these calculations are done correctly and on time. I mean, this is so much of what you do.
We go overboard. Every year we have a RMD party. Okay?
Oh, I love that.
And we bring everybody together, particularly everybody that's anywhere close to required minimum distributions, usually serve lunch, and everybody who hasn't taken their required minimum distribution out by October, we have all their paperwork together so they can sign right there, because if you don't take it out, then you incur the penalty. We want you to use your money in retirement. So we do it for you. We work it for you. We don't hide it. Some of the big box firms say, well, it was on page 3 of your statement. You should have read it. Well, I don't want to calculate the percentage of people who read through to page 3 on their statement word for word. We do it for you so that you don't have to incur this penalty. It's part of the overall comprehensive holistic planning that we do. We can do that for you. To look at what we do and how we do it. We call it a retirement blueprint. Just a little part of it is RMDs and making sure that we do it the right way. Call in, get an appointment with us, and we'll make sure you're on track properly so you're using your retirement money rather than losing your retirement money.
Wonderful. Tom, thank you so much. To our viewers at home, that number to call is there on the bottom of your screen. Simply dial 866-709-1462. You're also welcome to take out your smartphone. You can simply open up that camera app, point, click, and scan that QR code down in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. That will take you over to a landing page, ask you a few short, simple questions, and then a member of the team from Mosley Wealth Management will reach out and connect with you to schedule your time to come in for no cost, no charge, no obligation to receive your complimentary written financial plan. And if RMDs are on your mind and you want help navigating them, they are ready and willing to serve you. Now, we said we're calling the show Don't Try This at Home. When we come back, we're going to be sharing with you the 6 common traps that we see folks fall into when it comes to doing these RMD calculations, because we want to make sure that you avoid these traps yourself. Stay with us.
Fiduciary is a big word in our industry, and fiduciary means you act in a client's best interest. At Mosley Wealth Management, you are an individual. You're different than anybody else on this planet. You look different. You've got a different social security number. You live at a different address. Everything about you is different. The first visit is just getting to know them, getting to know where they are. We literally start with a blank legal pad. And at the end of that meeting, we just say, okay, you've brought a lot of stuff here. Do you want us to look at this stuff and see what we would recommend? And when I look at statements that people bring me from so-called fiduciaries, and I ask them, I say, why did you get put 50% in this and 50% in this? Many times they'll say, well, that's what the advisor said he likes to do. My question is, would I do this for my mom? Would I do this for my dad? Would I do this for myself? So you really have to sit back sometimes and say, if I were them, if I were sitting on their side of the table, what would I do? And I've literally sat in my office at least once every 2 or 3 weeks and try to put together a case for somebody where it's iffy as to whether they'll make it or not. And you have to ask yourself, what would I do if I were in their situation? And never, ever recommend something that you wouldn't do if you were right where they are.
Welcome back, Southern California. You're watching Right on the Money with Tom Mosley, and I'm your host, Kristen Oakley. We are having a very important conversation today about all things RMD related, those required minimum distributions that when you hit age 73, as the law stands right now, you have to begin withdrawing money from your tax-deferred accounts, your workplace retirement plans, 401k, 403b, your traditional IRAs. And if you don't, or if you do it yourself and you get the calculation wrong, you can also be hit with massive IRS penalties. And so we don't want that to happen to you. We're going to be going through now, Tom, some of the 6 common traps that we see folks fall into when they try to do this on their own. This is why we're calling the episode Don't Try This at Home. So first up, let's go through trap number 1, which is the law actually states that you can wait to take your first RMD until April 1st of the year following the year you turn 73.
So what?
I know. I'd like to meet the clown that wrote that rule, right? It's almost like it's an April Fool's joke, because who knows that off the top of their head? So what is the trap of waiting until and deferring that first RMD to April 1st of the year following the year that you turn 73?
Well, Kristen, I think there are multiple traps there. I ask this when I teach a tax class and we talk about required minimum distributions. I always ask, what's the big tax day in April? The whole crowd says April 15th. Now, it may be delayed a day or two if there's a holiday in some states or whatever, but April 15th. Well, the RMD date is April 1st of the year following the year you turn 73. Now, think about it. You think, a lot of people say, well, I'll just delay. That's a good idea. I'll keep the money. I'll continue to make money off of the money, and I'll wait and take it out in January, February, March, before April 1st. Sounds good, except the amount that you take out those 3 months by delaying till April 1st comes out as regular income, raises your regular income. You have to be taxed on that. All's well and done. Let's go home. Time out. You then have to take a second required minimum distribution out that remainder of that year.
That same year.
Same year. So before December 31st, or you're going to get penalized on it.
Right.
And it's not April 1st every year. It's only that first year. You have to take the second required minimum distribution out. So those 2 required minimum distributions can do a lot of things. They can cause your Social Security that potentially was not taxed before to be taxed or fully taxed, partially or fully taxed. They can raise you to another tax bracket bracket by having to take 2. So the gotcha is April 1st rather than April 15th. The second gotcha is you have to take out 2 required minimum distributions that first year.
Yeah.
I try to encourage our people, all other things being equal, just take it out in the year you're 73 because you're going to have to take out one in the year when you're 74. It's a gotcha.
Right. Just because you can defer doesn't necessarily mean that you should for all those reasons.
I can talk back to my wife.
Yes.
But it's not good for my health, right? It's not good for you financially to defer, right?
Yes, yes, absolutely. All right, so trap number 2 is failure to adjust your RMD if you're still working. This is a really interesting one, Tom, because a lot of people are working longer. You know, they're continuing to work in their 70s. So talk about why that's a trap.
Well, here's a trap, because if you are still working and you have a 401k and you're over 70, you can continue to contribute to that 401k, and you do not have to take an RMD out of that 401k as long as you're still employed. But if you have an IRA, a regular IRA over here, and you have some money in there, maybe from a 401k that you've moved over from a previous job, you do have to start taking at 73. You do have to start taking a required minimum distribution out of IRAs. So is that confusing? Absolutely. This is confusing on Main Street. This is confusing in shoe leather where people live. It's a gotcha.
For sure. And if you've left an old 401k behind and it's been dormant, which as so many people have, that's, you know, I think the average American worker has 5 old accounts floating around out there. So if you have these old accounts, you've forgotten about them, the RMD is still due, and if you don't take it, wham, you're going to be hit with that penalty again.
They're not going to get upset with you, Kristen, because they get to penalize you and excise tax, and it's more money, and they'll send you a thank you note.
Right.
All of that's true except the thank you note. They won't send you the thank you note.
We don't want you to be in that position.
That's right.
All right.
That's right.
Well, the third common trap that we see people fall into when they try to do these calculations on their own is failure to use the account balance as of December 31st of the prior year. Let's talk about that one.
Yeah, we could do a whole show on every one of these. If you wait till like November to take your required minimum distribution for this year, sounds good. I just go see what my account balance is in November. But what if we've had a 20% increase? More importantly, what if we've had a 20% decrease? It doesn't matter what your account value is the day you take your required minimum distribution. Everything that matters is the account value on December 31st of the previous year. That's set in stone on December 31st. That's what the required minimum distribution is based on. Confusing.
Gosh, there's so many ways to get this wrong.
Right.
It's just mind-blowing, right? All right, well, number 4 is failure to take the RMD from the proper account. And this kind of ties into what we just mentioned about having multiple accounts. So talk about that.
If I have 3 IRAs and I'm 73 years of age, I can aggregate the amount that should come from each of those IRAs and take the entire amount out of one IRA. If I have 3 401ks, 403bs, 457s, the post office TSP savings and those kind of things, if I have 3 of those, any of those, I have to take an individual amount out of every single one of those 4 plans or those retirement plans that are not IRA. So I can add them all together with the IRA, but I've got to take something out of each one. This is one of the key reasons. Consolidation, building a plan, having a blueprint is so important, because you pull it all together so you can get it all under one umbrella and you can make the right choices. We have people come to us sometimes and they've got an IRA that, I want to leave it over there. It's my brother-in-law, you know, that watches that. Well, the brother-in-law might not be doing the right thing, and it might impact what you're doing with all of the other accounts.
For sure, because as we always say on the show, how you make a decision in one area of your life in financial terms does and will affect all the others. You've got to know what's going on and have these different pieces talking to each other, if you will. Right?
Exactly.
Well, we've covered the first 4 traps. We still have 2 more for you, but if any of this is resonating with you and you're thinking, gosh, like my friends I shared at the beginning of the episode, you might be working with another financial advisor and they're not having these kinds of conversations with you. It's time to get a second opinion. We encourage you, pick up the phone, call that number on the bottom of your screen, 866-709-1462, to schedule your time to come in and meet with the amazing team of Mosley Wealth Management. They would love to be able to walk through and navigate your RMDs with you. More on today's show right after this.
The work never seems to end until the day it finally does. After nearly a lifetime on the job, you should be rewarded for all the time you spent working. Whether that's crossing off items on your bucket list, learning a new passion, or rekindling the love of an old one. After all, life isn't over when you stop working. It's the start of an all-new chapter. The one where you're the writer and you get to choose how your story will go. A way to achieve that is by having a clear financial plan to sustain your golden years. The biggest fear most retirees have is if they'll have enough money to maintain the lifestyle they've always enjoyed. Having a plan to help protect you against the curveballs life often throws will help to maintain your lifestyle. Call today to get your free written financial plan so you may live every day to the fullest and enjoy the retirement of your dreams.
Welcome back to Right on the Money with Tom Mosley. I'm your host, Kristen Oakley. Today's show, we are talking about RMDs, required minimum distributions, what you need to know about them, and we are covering the 6 most common traps that we see folks fall into when they try to do these calculations on their own. And Tom, as we've said all throughout the show, you don't want to get it wrong, because if you do, not only are you going to have to pay the RMD, but you're going to be hit with massive IRS penalties, and we want you to avoid being in that situation. So we're up to number 5, trap number 5, if you will, which is failure to calculate your life expectancy annually.
Right. It's based on life expectancy, what you have to take out every year. It's never a percentage. In fact, anybody who tells you, oh, it's just a percentage, I'll say this lovingly, kindly, they don't know what they're talking about. It's always a factor based on your life expectancy. And guess what? Every year we spend, every day we spend, we get one day closer or 1 year closer to that day. So that it's always changing. As I said earlier, it's always growing. They're making you take more and more and more out because your life expectancy is shorter and shorter and shorter. It's always a factor. So it's never a percentage. You can't set it and forget it, because that calculation changes every single year. And guess what? A year ago, they changed the calculations overall because they did life expectancy tables again.
Right.
So it is something that somebody needs to be on top of. It's not something that you can just go to sleep on. And again, here's the point. You say, well, I'll just take excess amount. You may be paying excess tax you don't need to be taking.
Right.
What you need to be doing is taking the right amount out with certainty, so that, and it's a factor, it's not a percentage.
Yes. And as a result, because your life expectancy is changing every year, that calculation changes every single year. So to your point, it's not just, oh, this is my amount once I turn 73 and that's my amount moving forward.
Right.
All right, finally, we're up to our 6th common trap, which is failure to handle RMDs from inherited IRAs correctly. And this is really important because, once again, the law recently changed on this.
Well, a lot of people have trouble understanding and knowing what IRA stands for. So when they come over to us, they bring us a pile of statements sometimes, and and sometimes people come to our events. Okay, you can go to our website, mosleywealthmanagement.com. You can see all of our events, and sometimes people will start asking me questions. I've got this ABC account and it does this and this and this, and I'm sitting there listening and I'm thinking, that doesn't sound like an ABC account. And sure enough, when they come in, they bring their statements, they sit down with us, they've got an XYZ account. It's something entirely different. Well, beneficiary IRA and IRA, even though they sound related and they are somewhat similar in the same field, they are a different animal. One of them is a white cow and the other one is a brown cow. They're completely different in the way you're looking at them and the way you take money out of them. And again, Kristen, 4 years ago, they changed the way you're supposed to take money out of a beneficiary IRA, and as to now, as opposed to what it was 2019 and before. So it's a difficult thing, and you need to know exactly what kind of IRA that you have and what needs to come out of that every single year.
How much needs to come out of where and when? I mean, 3 crucial questions that you've got to get right.
Right. And the issue after that is, what do you do with it once it comes out?
Yes. Yep.
Because a lot of people come out and they say, well, I think it's time now I do those Roth conversions. Here's the problem. They will not allow you, the governmental law will not allow you to take the RMD, the required minimum distribution, this may be news to some of you, and put that then and convert it over into a Roth. That has to be taxed, and they want that to go into an after-tax account. So you can't put it into a Roth IRA unless you have income to support it, and you can put up to $7,500 at that point into a Roth IRA if you have earned income, okay? But just taking the money out of the regular IRA, moving it over into a Roth and counting that as your RMD doesn't work, doesn't happen. They're gonna penalize you for doing that. So what do you do with it? You spend it. Okay, some people that we have, they'll call in February and they'll say, let that turn on for the next 10 or 11 months as a flow of income all through the year. That's one way to work it. At the end of the year, a lot of times, Kristen, people call us up and they say, let me take my required minimum distribution. I want to spend that on Christmas or doing something for my family.
Or a big trip with the family or something, right? Yeah.
So you got flexibility in your planning as to how you spend it. Some people who totally don't need it, and if they're healthy, you still want to leave it to your kids. Well, life insurance is a way of spending pennies but getting dollars and boom to your family after you're gone, and life insurance passes tax-free. So I've got a few people, not everybody, but a few people take that required minimum distribution, and yes, even at that age, they buy a life insurance policy because that's what they're going to leave their kids or their grandkids, and so that might be a way that you send it to perpetuate it, because some people come and say, I never need it. Here's the thing, you need a retirement blueprint. The required minimum distributions are one little segment of a retirement blueprint, and you need yours from a blank piece of paper to know. You say, well, I would want to do this, or I would want to do that. Fine, you do what you want to do, but you need a retirement blueprint to do that. You need a map, you need a guideline, and part of that is doing required minimum distribution and doing them in such a way that you're using your money in retirement rather than losing your money because you get taxed and penalized. Please call us, get on our schedule. Let's do a retirement blueprint for you.
Wonderful. Tom, thank you so much. And I have to say that RMD party also makes it sound a lot of fun.
It was, it is,
right?
it is.
And I love that you do that for folks and that you're on top of it.
7 years in a row we've done it.
That's amazing. You're on top of it, and this might be new to you, but the good news is you don't have to be an expert in any of this stuff. You just get to be an expert in you. Allow Tom and a team of Mosley Wealth Management to help and serve you with this critical area. Again, that number to call, 866-709-1462. Be safe, be happy, be blessed. We look forward to being back with you next week.